Did you think losing fat would be easy? Well, I thought the same. Calories in, calories out, right? Which is true, but there's also a smarter way to go about it. So to help you shift the timber, I've constructed 24 lessons that I wish I knew at the beginning of my journey. These are steaming up, man. I don't know what's going on with that. And ultimately make this entire process easier for you. So let's dive straight in. I used to think eating certain foods would make me fat. I remember scrolling on TikTok and seeing people who were in shape label certain foods as poison, and yeah, it became a bit of a shit show. However, back in early 2024, I decided to do something called the Domino's Challenge, which is where I ate a Domino's pizza every day for 30 days and lost 6 kilos within that process. This proved that no foods inherently make you fat, but the quantity of that food you consume does. So this is lesson number 1. It doesn't matter what food you eat, as long as you're in a calorie deficit, you will drop body fat. And of course, disclaimer, don't be a pleb like I did and do this for 30 days, given that was quite an extreme challenge, just to prove a point. But there's nothing saying you can't occasionally enjoy your favorite comfort foods from time to time and still make progress to your goal. You would have gone to an all-inclusive breakfast and loaded your plate with croissants and pain au chocolats. However, this does not scratch the surface of your hunger, as an hour later, you're hungry and want more. Compared to having a breakfast with wholemeal bread, scrambled eggs, bacon medallions, whatever you fancy, you'll then be stuffed for hours. To understand this, I want you to view calories like a mile. A mile is a mile. Whether you walk a straight mile or ride a bicycle downhill, a mile is just a mile. The same concept applies to calories, given it's just a unit of measurement for energy. So lesson number 2 is a calorie is just a calorie, but where you choose to get your calories from can influence how hard or easy you find adhering to a calorie deficit. Also, I've made a completely free resource, which is 52 ways across 52 days to help you shift a bit of that unwanted fluff, and you can find this within the description. So you remember how I used to scroll on TikTok and get my nutrition advice from there? Well, I found myself over-restricting anything that gave me an ounce of pleasure, and consequently, I would then binge. It was only when I stumbled into a book called The Comfort Crisis by Michael Easter, which taught me to change my perspective on food. He interviewed a doctor called Trevor Kashi, and he explains how over-restriction was actually a problem for why people couldn't adhere to their deficit. And the way certain foods are engineered are also a contributor to why people can't stop overeating, including myself. Also, there's a difference between over-restriction and restriction, given a calorie deficit is energy restriction. Over-restriction is when you just take it to the extreme, you crash diet, you cut out any carbs or anything like that, and then you know where that leads to. So this is lesson number 3, where it's really important to see food as just food, and all food is just composed of different amounts of nutrients and calories. It's not inherently bad or good. Food is just food. So I used to be a professional gamer, and one of my staple breakfasts was crumpets with Nutella. I did not care about the portion sizes, and I would absolutely lather it in the stuff because it's just insane. However, that led me to gain weight over COVID. It was only when I made a piece of short form content and I actually weighed out 15 grams of Nutella, and yeah, I was not happy. And the reality was I was actually consuming hundreds of calories more than what I thought I was actually eating. So lesson 4 is to make sure that you're weighing out your foods and to be cautious of hidden calories like sauces, oils, butters, and even spreads, because most things aren't 0 calories and humans are notoriously shit at eyeballing things too. When I was boxing, you had to be at a certain weight to qualify for a fight, and sometimes you would have to cut really fast. So young Jaden thought it was logical to skip meals and only have perhaps like fruit and snacks throughout the day, and that put me in an extreme deficit, and I noticed my mood was shit. I remember this one time saying I just want my eggs back. My performance within the gym deteriorated and my energy was a lot lower. So although to you it might make logical sense to go in an extreme deficit and go hard and pound it to the wall, get in, get out, from a long-term perspective that might not be helpful whatsoever. Compared to when I did the Domino's Challenge, I made sure I had regular meals throughout the day to help with my hunger, help with my energy, help with my performance. It was just lowering calories. So lesson 5 is not to skip meals. Intermittent fasting works for some people, but me, not my cup of tea. And plus, if you care about building strength, looking good, and perhaps gaining more muscle, it's a lot easier to hit your protein across 3 to 4 different meals compared to 2. When my mum began her journey of losing 30 plus kilos, I remember her wanting to cut out carbs, and I was like, why? Well, she replied with, because they're fattening, they make you fat. But is that actually true? It was only when she implemented her pain au chocolat and her cappuccino into her daily calories and still managed to lose body fat that she came to the conclusion that no inherent macronutrient like carbs or fat make you fat. But again, it comes down to the quantity of calories that you're consuming. So lesson 6 is to not cut out carbs entirely. They're very important for fueling your gym sessions, and also they taste pretty banging. It also helps with your energy day to day. But key word there is completely cut out, as again, you will have to reduce your calories from somewhere. I absolutely love a bag of Maltesers whilst I'm chilling, whether that's gaming or watching a movie. However, the problem is it just tends to disappear, and then I've realized I've consumed a metric fuck ton of calories. This is because when you're watching something or playing a game, you tend to just mindlessly eat and pick and grab. But if you still want to get that same chocolate craving, just get the smaller pre-portioned versions of them. And of course, it might not be the same as like an entire family bag. I get that, but some sacrifices have to be made. So lesson 7 is to start making smarter swaps with your food choices, like getting smaller versions of your favorite foods, or going from full fat mayo to low fat mayo. And lesson 7.5 is understanding that sustainability and adherence are paramount when it comes to a successful fat loss phase. So the more you feel like you can do this for a period of time, and the more likely that you can actually execute on a day-to-day basis, the better. So if that's a chocolate bar a day for you, then so be it. You've probably found yourself complaining in the past that you can't lose weight because you've been good all week. You'll smash your training from Monday to Friday, you'll have the structure, your food's on point, there's no like grazing throughout the day. However, the weekend comes and you decide to go out for brunch, and then you see a really nice bakery shop and may as well get a mocha as well. And fuck it, you might even have a takeaway. And the Sunday is more of a lazy day and you're just grazing about whilst you're chilling. So this is lesson number 8, and that's weekend calories still matter, and it's also important that you still track them because you have a weekly deficit, and sometimes a few days in a row where you go into an excessive surplus, that can wipe out your previous hard work during the week. When I was boxing, I remember waking up and getting out of bed to go jump on the scales, and there was this time where I saw it spike by over a kilo, and I thought, you fat fuck. And obviously there was a lot of pressure given I had to be at a certain weight to fight, and it was very demoralizing when it wasn't going in the right direction. And then that would lead to me sending it with food or doing excessive amounts of exercise just to get the weight off, but that's not very sustainable and not good for your mental health. That's when I decided to start weighing myself daily and actually track the data, because weight spikes are completely normal on a fat loss journey, and what matters more is the overall trend, because your weight will go up and then it'll go down and then down and then down, up and then down, then down. So you eat more carbs, you're more stressed, you have a poor night's sleep, you're literally carrying more poo in you. That can all constitute to weight, and weight isn't always reflective of pure fat mass. And weighing daily can help remove the emotional attachment to the scales and desensitize from them. So lesson 9 is understand that it's really hard to gain a load of fat overnight, because you would have to consume 7,700 calories above your maintenance to gain a single kilogram of fat overnight. I can guarantee you're not doing that. However, your response to them scales when they do spike makes or breaks your progress, whether you decide to send it with food or you continue to chip away at the controllables every day and just keep going with your deficit. It can sometimes be a ball ache tracking calories when you have two conflicting goals. Like, you want to make progress towards this fat loss, but you also want to go out and enjoy yourself on a social occasion. So it was when I listened to a podcast from Nick Bare, which actually reframed the way I saw this. And it was called Forwards Thinking and Backwards Planning. So in your calorie tracking app, you would log the amount of calories you want to save for dinner and potentially snacks. Then you'd go back a step and see the remaining amount of calories that you have and evenly distribute this across lunch and breakfast. And you might have smaller ones throughout the day to allocate for a high calorie evening. So lesson 10 is 5 minutes of preparation can save you a massive headache with trying to catch up on your progress from one night. There's a lot of plebs online expressing their views on nutrition, on what you should be eating, what you shouldn't be eating, red meat, carnivore, keto, all of this nonsense. And sometimes it can feel really overwhelming and complicated, but as James Smith said, 80% of the time you just want to be consuming foods that rot within a week, because that will contain your fiber, your micronutrients, your protein, and everything else that your body needs. There are going to be certain factors like finances that prevent someone's ability to eat healthy, but through making your best effort to eat foods that do rot within a week, it will make fat loss a shit ton easier. So lesson 11 is to start adding more whole foods to your diet. Berries, lean proteins, minimally processed cereals like Weetabix and oats, and that will do a lot of heavy lifting to help you stop feeling so hungry. I genuinely thought losing a lot of weight would make me happy, and it did. I could finally see my abs for the first time. However, I wasn't actually fulfilled, because despite being pretty lean, I never felt like a man, and that's because I was quite weak, and the way I got lean wasn't in a proper way. Again, it was through skipping meals or just having fruit for like breakfast and lunch. Some of my meals, man, they were, yeah, tuna, rice and spring onions, one of them. However, 3 years later, after going to the gym consistently and nailing my nutrition most of the time, I feel like I have a lot more substance and way more muscle mass compared to when I started. So lesson 12 is actually making sure that you're training alongside this and understanding that great results take time. Sometimes, even nowadays, I find myself in the kitchen for no reason other than the fact I want a little snack. However, impulsive eating, like when you're bored, only negatively affects your progress towards your goal. And fat loss requires patience, and that doesn't mean you're just sitting around doing nothing. It's just finding something else to do in the meantime and keep yourself busy. Reading a book, gaming, doing some Lego, listening to a podcast, go for a walk. There's so many different things that you can do. But lesson 13 is making sure you have some structure to your day and try and stay busy, especially on the weekends. When I was going through my breakup, I resorted to stoicism to help me get through it. And to really oversimplify it, it means just focusing on what's within your control and accepting what is outside of your control for what it is. So by focusing on what you can control, it gives you a lot of clarity and direction, because you control your actions, you control your words, you control your behaviors, you to an extent control your habits, and anything outside of this doesn't necessarily get ignored, but it's something that you're mindful of. And I couldn't really do a lot about the breakup. I went back, and yeah, don't do that, it's not great. However, that breakup influenced me massively, and I had 2 different choices. I could either go to the gym and feel that pain to work on myself and improve my strength, how I saw myself, all of the above. Or I sit on the couch, am I American? Sit on the sofa, you know, just comfort eat and stay in bed and feel really sorry for myself. And this concept is called controlling the controllables. To adapt whatever life throws at you and finding something to do to move you closer to your goal. For some days for me during that breakup, it was just getting out of bed and going for a walk or doing a run. Whereas other days it was absolutely making sure I nail all of my targets. So lesson 14 is to always control the controllables and do something to move you closer to your goal, whether that is small or big. It just has to be something. I'm sure you like myself, you've gone to the cinema with a big bag of popcorn and a Tango Ice Blast. You're watching all the shitty adverts and then eventually the trailers come on and you go back to look at all of your snacks and they're gone. This goes to show the power of your environment, because when things are in sight or just in arm's reach, you're naturally going to consume more calories, as that can trigger a craving and start a habit loop. So if your home environment is absolutely littered with super yummy food and it's constantly in sight, then you're going to find it much harder to adhere to a deficit, because whenever you get cravings or you're feeling a bit hungry or peckish, you can solve it there and then. It's not exactly hard to not. You just go over to the biscuit tin and have one. Then you have another, because it's not that filling. So lesson 15 is to make sure that you're designing a supportive environment to help make your goals easier. During that breakup as well, there was a particular scenario where I found myself in the kitchen again, and I had one bowl of fruit and fiber. But I didn't just have one, I had multiple. I had like 3 or 4. And I couldn't understand why I wouldn't stop overeating on it. I remember like the internal voice in my head was like, come on, like, you know, you should be disciplined, whatever, we don't need to get into that. And it was only when I read that book again, The Comfort Crisis, that I was actually comfort eating to help self-soothe myself and alleviate that stress. However, long term, that made me very miserable, as I went for a very long run after that to burn it off. The problem itself wasn't inherently eating multiple bowls of cereal, but my inability to have other ways to manage my stress levels, because I was resorting to food to get that dopamine hit to make me temporarily feel better. However, whenever you do that, you end up just feeling worse. So lesson 16 is making sure you have multiple ways to manage your stress, whether that's through exercise, talking to a friend, brain dumping like journaling. Again, it's flexible to what you need, and experiment, have fun with it. Try something for 2 weeks, and then if you don't like it, sack it off. So during COVID, I thought it was cool to perform all nights with the boys. And yes, they were some of the best times of my life, but it also made my life a bit shit, because the problem was during the night I would get bored, I'd go have a bowl of ramen and then perhaps some chocolate buttons, whatever it might be. But when you're going to bed at stupid o'clock and not really prioritizing sleep, not only are you not getting deep sleep, so you don't feel recovered the next morning, but your mood's off, your energy's off, your cravings are through the roof, you're snappier. It's just, sleep is so important. So lesson 17 is ensuring that you have a regular sleeping pattern, and yes, you would have heard it, ideally get 7 hours of sleep. But I think what's more important is actually making sure you're relaxed prior, so that you have a high likelihood of getting into deep sleep. During summer of 2023, I was pretty sick of the fact that I kept binging and had no real control over my emotions. I felt like I was at the mercy of them. And that's when I started to do journaling. And there's an absolute killer quote I heard from this Total Mental Performance course, and it's better to express your subconscious in private than it is through your actions, behaviors, or words. How many times have you lashed out in anger or acted out of impulse just to later regret it? By journaling and getting all of that energy onto a piece of paper or onto your iCloud notes, whatever it might be, you're essentially giving it less power, and you're able to like rationalize. By journaling as well and doing self-prompted journaling, you get to explore where these feelings are coming from and how you can handle certain situations better. Personally, really love the 5-minute bitch, and that's where I just keep that to myself, where I just go to town with yeah but I think you get the gist of what that might be like. Stuff you would not say to someone's face, but that's private to you, and as long as you don't communicate it and actually think that way, because again, not all your thoughts are true, then you're fine. So lesson number 18 is to start journaling, and that doesn't have to be anything fancy. Again, I just use my iCloud notes. It makes the barrier to entry a lot easier compared to sitting down, writing with a pen and paper, getting the music on, whatever. Like, I can do it wherever. A couple of days ago, I could not be bothered to go to the gym. The thought of doing heavy deadlifts and working legs is pretty grim. However, 99.5% of the time, every situation I've chosen not to go to that session simply because I wasn't feeling like it only amplified how shit I felt. But because I've collected so much evidence over the years where I've pushed through them sort of initial unmotivated feelings, and afterwards I feel great because I've actually worked hard and I've done something that aligns me to my future self, I've always felt better. And that's when your subconscious starts recording evidence of how you feel afterwards. So when you're presented with the same scenario, you're like, right, been here before, I know that these feelings, they're temporary. I do know as well, if I go and smash a workout, even if I control the controllables and only do 30 minutes and still give my 30 minutes my all, I will feel much better for it. So lesson 19 is doing something today that the tomorrow version of you would appreciate. There was this one time when I went to watch the Hollywood Vampires with Johnny Depp, as it was my mum's favourite band. And I remember being in a foul mood because we was at this Premier Inn and I could not do my usual run or control my food. And you best believe at that Premier Inn I had an all-inclusive breakfast and I made the most of it. Get your money's worth, right? And that made me feel pretty rubbish. Then when we went to the actual concert itself, I was miserable, partly because the music is not my cup of tea whatsoever, but also because I was so stuck in my own head that I wasn't perfect with my workout or I couldn't do my run and I was worrying about the amount of calories I ate. It completely destroyed a potential memory that could have happened and a really nice time with mum. And it did affect her as well, which I'm not proud to say. So paradoxically, something that's meant to make my life better actually made it worse. So lesson 20 is understanding that sometimes memories matter more than your diet or your workout regime. And it's really important you never miss twice, because missing once is valid, life might happen, but missing twice is more of a deliberate choice, and that's the formation of a habit. Growing up, I've always been told to get your money's worth with food, to always finish your plate, given the kids in Africa are always starving, and also if I wanted to grow big and strong, I'd have to finish my plate. I remember my Chinese nan always saying to me, "Yo, big boy, eat, grow strong." That's my terrible attempt at her accent. However, this way of thinking carried on into my teens and even adulthood, and I've always been classed as an eater, and that meant I had more body fat than I would have liked. And I'd always be someone to say yes to a cinnamon bun, yes to a piece of cake, yes to a biscuit, whatever it was. So lesson 21 is actually understanding that sometimes saying no is actually saying yes, but to the future version of yourself, to your ultimate goal, the one that's going to provide you with deep fulfillment and satisfaction and proudness of yourself. Because you don't always need to say yes to crisps, let's be honest. When my mum did lose that 30 kilos, one of the biggest factors that helped her was living with a PT. Not because I did anything special for her, but I simply held her accountable. Whenever she would go out for midnight munchies, I'd scream, "Mom!" She'd shit herself and then go back to her room and consequently not eat excessive amounts of calories in the night. So by publicly declaring your goals to someone or asking someone to hold you accountable, a friend, a partner, a coach, that can help give you that oomph to carry on with your goal, because it's really easy to fail yourself in private. So lesson 22 is to have someone hold you accountable. I remember the first time I walked into Pure Gym and I did sprints on a treadmill, and I was with my ex at the time and I tried my very best to finish the timer, so let it get to 0, and I couldn't. I had to hit the emergency stop and I got massive right stitch and I was panting out of my arse. That was an awful feeling. I'd never want to go there again. And since then, I've made a commitment to install the gym and this way of living as my lifestyle. Not a temporary phase where I go to the gym for a few months or I'm on a diet, whatever it might be. This is just how I live. And seeing this as something that you just do, it's a part of your identity. Naturally, your actions, your habits, your ways of thinking just align to your ultimate goal. So that way your ability to be disciplined and willpower just sort of diminishes, because it's just something that you do, and then you can use them to more sparingly as and when needed. So when you do cultivate your lifestyle around something that you enjoy, your training regime, the foods that you eat, the meals that you make, and also how you feel, it will just make it easier to adhere and sustain that calorie deficit. So that is lesson 23, understanding that this isn't just a short-term fix, but a permanent lifestyle change of who you are and what you do on a day-to-day basis. And that doesn't necessarily mean you'll be constantly in a calorie deficit and losing fat all the time, but when it comes to your eating habits or your patterns, such as always gravitating towards the high protein option, to include a salad with your meals, whatever it is, it's just the default. It's just something that you do, and that will help you sustain the fat loss as well. But yeah, that is just a short collection of some of the lessons I wish I knew at the beginning of my journey. And if you found this video useful, YouTube is pretty clever and I believe it will suggest a new video for you to watch here. But thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next one. But